We want technical supremacy in the next 5 to 10 years. There's going to be a huge wave in robotics. America needs to be at the forefront. America needs to make them. We need to understand how to program them. Our robots need to be smarter. So there's an AI track, right? There's a mechanical engineering track. Okay, well, there's a mining track. Let's get the materials. Let's make sure that we are beholden to nobody so that we can make them. By the way, these are all great paying jobs if you were able to actually get them permitted. And when push comes to shove, when it's like, yeah, get the rare earths out of the ground and make the permanent magnets, can't do it. Why? You're going to spend 13 years in permitting hell in California to try to get that done? So, and I know this, the reason I know this is that I started a business to make sure that China does not have access to the only supply of rare earths. And I initially tried to do it in California. Impossible. I invested in one business that actually had an old mine that we were able to get back online through a bankruptcy process and blah, blah, blah. But it's not nearly enough. So I went to India and I was able to get a deal done with the Indian government. And what they were able to see was the strategic rationale of making sure we had access to not only the rare earths, but to also to make sure that there were subsidies so that they would compete on the global stage cheaper than China. And now I can bring them back into the United States to make these magnets. Would I like to do that in America? Yes. Can I? Impossible. I'd be sitting around twiddling my thumbs for a decade. The guys in India did that deal with me in less than 18 months. They understand. There's an escalation point where they'll sit down and say, Chamath, what do you need? What makes sense? And I say, well, sir, here's what we're trying to do. Here's why it's important. Here's why having a global supply chain that's independent of China is just important. It's competitive. It's good for everybody. They're like, okay, great. X, Y, and Z, do the following 3 things. Build a plant over there. We'll make sure that we support you. Here, we just go into a morass and die.
I mean, can we generate, do we have the hardware to generate the electricity necessary to remain dominant in AI?
Yes. So the other crazy thing about that Biden EO is why couldn't you have just stopped the EO at that first paragraph?
Because it wouldn't include the control provisions, which are the whole point of it. We control your behavior. We give you something, but then we're in charge.
We're in charge. We have more nat gas and oil in the United States. I don't know if you saw this, Tucker, but there was a piece of data that came out this week, but our reliance on foreign oil is almost entirely gone.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning almost to where we don't even need to buy it anymore. Not just that we make more than we import, but where the imports will soon go to zero.
Yes.
That's an incredible statement about the energy independence of America. It's the single most obvious way to, by the way, to guarantee peace.
Well, yeah.
If you're not fighting over that critical resource, it's going to be very unlikely you're going to go to war, which if you look past the last 4 or 5 wars, the trillions of dollars and the hundreds of thousands of American lives, what were they all about? Oil. And now, we have the ability to power those data centers. So should data centers be built in a fair, predictable way on federal land? Yeah, because it feeds the technical supremacy we all need. Now, by the way, there is a conversation to be had is, okay, great. When you have all this economic abundance, how do you share it more? I get that.
Right.
But at least you're in a position to have the conversation.
That is jumping ahead.
So back to this though, but if you're able to build these things, I think what Biden should have done is just say, hey, listen, folks, do your best, get the energy because it exists, use nat gas, use oil, and we will figure it out after we've won. That feels like leadership.
Right, but he can't do that because he's surrounded by people who have already said no hydrocarbons, period. So,
but it's not rooted in any reality.
No, I'm aware. It's
rooted in moral grandstanding.
Oh, I've noticed. But I just think that if you've got mandates for net zero or mandates for no hydrocarbons, mandates for EVs, and this economic imperative around AI, I just don't, and people like air conditioning, I just don't think we're going to have enough electricity unless there's hardware built really soon.
It's incredible that you mentioned air conditioning. So back to sort of one of these ways where I was like, after 2022, how can I just get back to basics and do the things that I do well? One of the projects that I started with this incredible mechanical engineer was we set out to rebuild the air conditioner.
Yeah, good.
And when you look at air conditioners, the heat transfer mechanisms can be made much, much more efficient, and you don't have to use this horrible coolants. And so we have a working version now. It's like our second prototype. We're probably 2 years away from getting something working. But when that works, by the way, we've started a process to figure out how do we sell it. But this is, again, Tucker, it's like if I tried to sell it to a home, the number of people that want to touch that thing,
oh, I know.
It will take me an extra $150 million and an extra 150. It'll take $150 million to build it. It'll take an extra $150 million and an extra 7 years.
To comply with code.
What is it that I'm supposed to do?
And by the way, not to be like pedantic, but those rules were never passed by the Congress.
I don't think those rules were passed by people, even to give them the benefit of the doubt, by 1 degree removed, folks that even have an understanding of like physics.
No, well, of course not. Of course not.
So there was probably a very smart, capable lawyer representing some smart organization who knew that this was something that they could write in to slow people down. But what people need to understand is it just slows down our ability to remain number one.
But where does this, I think you're exactly right. I think you've described it very nicely, but I'm still baffled by the motive. Why would people in a country as great as ours want to wreck the country? Where does that come from?
I don't think that they want to wreck the country as much as I think that they have lost the global context. I don't think they understand that we are in an existential risk of no longer being number one. And I think that they also don't understand the implications if we are not number one. You need to just look at the UK. If you want to have a very simple and visible picture of a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant nation completely losing itself, totally losing the economic war, losing the military war, losing the technology war, and fighting a fringe issue war, you need to just look there. And people should ask themselves, is that what we aspire to?
I'd rather live in Pakistan than live in the UK. I'm being serious. I think it's the most depressing country on the planet for the reasons that you just described. There's something about decline that's hard to describe, but when you're there, you feel it.
It's terrible.
It's soul.
It's so much worse. You're much better off, to your point, being in a developing nation on the come up than you are 100%. being in a.
There are over 200,000 Brits in UAE right now.
Right.
In UAE, which they formerly controlled until not that long ago. Right. And now there's a massive outflow. There are far more Brits in the Emirates than there are Emiratis in Britain.
So the thing that we need to do, I think, as a Western set of nations, is we need to understand and agree on the fact that governance over this last decade has totally and miserably failed by focusing on these fringe issues and by losing sight of these global priorities.
With Donald Trump returning to the White House, this country has a unique opportunity, maybe our last opportunity, to save ourselves from the anti-American and anti-human left. But our efforts may be stymied by the deep state. That's what happened to the first Trump term. Permanent Washington stands in the way of all efforts to improve the lives of ordinary Americans. And right now they are scheming to do the same thing to the second Trump administration. They are determined to keep their stranglehold on power, regardless of elections, anti-democratically. That is a fact. So what do you do to fight them? How do you defeat the deep state? Well, one way you can is by supporting the Heritage Foundation, which is in Washington and understands exactly how it works in such a way that they're a threat and they're under attack. You know who's effective because they're the ones under attack. Heritage has a comprehensive plan to dismantle permanent Washington and restore the country to its democratic foundations. It's important. Visit heritage.org/Tucker to learn more and to support this critical effort. And when you make a gift today, you get a free pocket constitution to make certain that you are equipped with the founding principles on your person at all times. It's amazing to read it. Again, that's heritage.org/Tucker.
I'll give you a different example. At the end of the global financial crisis, Canada emerged as the healthiest G7 country out of all of us. They were doing phenomenally well, low debt to GDP, phenomenal growth. And then over those intervening 17 years, they've focused on all kinds of fringe issues. Rampant open immigration, poor allocation of risk capital inside of Canada. They've allowed this incredible flight of human capital to the United States.
Oh, yeah.
And now today, if Canada were to join the United States, it would be poorer than Alabama on a per capita basis.
Oh, yeah. And much more depressing.
So what has happened in Canada?
There's a vibe shift. When countries decline, it's not simply a matter of GDP moving in the wrong direction. It's the spirit of the country is palpably different and sad. I mean, it's why so many Canadians accept their government's invitation to kill them through the MAIDS program. Like, their suicide rate is insane. Why is that? That's not a measure, that's a sign of health or vigor or ascendance. That's a sign of, terminal decline. It's like shocking. You're from there. When you go back, what does it feel like?
My dad passed away 10 years ago. My mom now comes to see us, so I rarely go back. Actually, I'm going to be back in February for a little bit. I've always felt like a fish out of water in Canada.
Yeah.
I've loved it for many reasons. I think that it had some principles back then that I think are very legitimate and I think should exist in the United States. The most important being a capped cost of higher education. I spent $12,000 a year to get an electrical engineering degree from a place called the University of Waterloo, which globally is as good, frankly, better than MIT. If I had to be in the United States, and if I had gotten into MIT, which I probably would not have, but had I been able to, I'd be $100,000 or $200,000 in debt. And so had I not had this lottery ticket for me pay off with an IPO and working at Facebook, I don't know where I would be today. That's crazy. So there are things that Canada, I think, and we should acknowledge that, does really right. That is probably the most important thing that it does right. And I think the idea of a state-sponsored healthcare system, it's implemented horribly poorly. But there are elements of that where I think, especially around sort of capped costs, which I think are important, meaning, in the United States, a healthcare CEO was telling me, when you look inside of an EMR system, the electronic medical care system, let's say, Tucker, you're a doctor and you did a knee surgery, you would have 100 different prices attached to you, depending on the plan, depending on the insurer. That's dumb. You are one person. Those are one set of hands. Exactly. That's one surgery. It's one quality. The idea that one person is lucky enough to pay $1,000 deductible and the other person has to pay $50,000 is an egregious market failure. It's just egregious.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.